The final report is out. The conclusion from special counsel Jack Smith is in. And here is Smith's take on Donald Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election just days before the president-elect is set to retake office after winning the 2024 election. When it became clear Mr. Trump had lost the election, he resorted to a series of criminal efforts to retain power. Jack Smith goes on to say, but for Mr. Trump's election and imminent return to the presidency, the admissible evidence was sufficient to obtain and sustain a conviction at trial. The report dropped while most everyone was sleeping around 1 o'clock in the morning, and almost immediately the president-elect responded, calling Jack Smith deranged, insisting the prosecution was all political. Let's start this hour with Caitlin Polantz on everything else that we learn in this 130-page report. Good morning, Caitlin.
Kate, just sum it up. What Jack Smith is saying here is we think Donald Trump would have been found guilty at trial even after the Supreme Court allowed for immunity around the presidency, even after we rewrote the indictment. And here is all of the evidence we gathered and are thinking. That's how the report is shaped. It goes into quite a bit of detail. Kate, one of the things that Jack Smith has to look at here is why charge Donald Trump, how to charge Donald Trump, and especially how to handle charges against Donald Trump during an election year when Trump believes he should have a lot of protections and that he was being under attack from a political perspective. Smith addresses this head on, though, in the report. He writes, there is unquestionably a public interest in ensuring that elected officials and election workers can carry out their duties without fear of threats and retaliation. Accordingly, the need to promote this federal interest weighed in favor of proceeding against Mr. Trump. They say that they wanted to proceed against Trump in this case because of not just the violence that he was behind and instigating at the Capitol on January 6th of 2021, but the amount of deceit that Trump had publicly in trying to lead his supporters to that moment where he was convincing them of election fraud when he himself knew there was none. Another thing, Kate, that's important to point out, Jack Smith accompanied this report with a letter defending his team, putting it in the course of history and saying that you think that this was a political prosecution. It was not. My team had integrity. He writes, the claim from Mr. Trump that my decision as a prosecutor were influenced or directed by the Biden administration or other political actors is, in a word, laughable. Kate?
Yep. Not mincing any words on that one, that's for sure. Caitlin, thank you so much. Sarah.
All right. Let's bring in Elie Honig, the CNN senior legal analyst and former assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York. Just in looking at this and hearing what you heard Caitlin say, is what we are seeing a typical report by a special counsel?
So in most respects, yes, Sarah. When you look at the substantive body of this report, it's what we expect to see from special counsel and from Jack Smith. It is a systematic, methodical laying out of the evidence and explaining how that evidence meets the laws that Jack Smith chose to indict Donald Trump on. The part that's unusual, though, is that 4-page introductory letter that Caitlin just mentioned. It is an intense, almost emotional defense of Jack Smith's team. Now, it's normal to see special counsel write something in a couple sentences saying, my team was very hardworking and had high integrity and was not political. But he goes on a rant. He quotes John Adams. He quotes former attorneys general. He says the criticism of him was laughable. And I suppose one could look at that as an important and necessary example of Jack Smith standing up for his team. On the other hand, though, it's hard to read that and then conclude that everything that follows is completely separate from emotion and completely workmanlike and has nothing to do with his personal feelings. So as with many things, Sarah, it's in the eye of the beholder.
I'm just interested in him saying, look, this does not mean that you, Donald Trump, are exonerated. Have you seen that before?
Sure. I mean, Robert Mueller is one example, but this is a unique circumstance because we got to a place where there was an indictment, a grand jury found probable cause, but we never got to a place where a jury had to decide whether there was proof beyond a reasonable doubt. So it's 0% surprising that Jack Smith said, I don't exonerate you. In fact, Jack Smith clearly feels strongly that his evidence was substantial.
I want to get your thoughts, speaking of a jury of your peers, deciding this ultimately if it were to go to court. I want to get your thoughts on this part of the report, which said the department's view that the Constitution prohibits the continued indictment and prosecution of a president is categorical and does not come on the gravity of the crimes charged, the strength of the government's proof, or the merits of the prosecution, which the office stands fully behind, and goes on to say, indeed, but for Mr. Trump's election and imminent return to the presidency, the office assessed that the admissible evidence was sufficient to obtain and sustain a conviction at trial. Is Jack Smith saying that he guarantees this would have ended up in a conviction, even though this would be a jury making this decision?
Very important clarification there, Sarah. This is not quite the flex that it may seem to be. Jack Smith is not saying a jury would convict. No prosecutor would ever say that. Jack Smith's been a prosecutor for 30 years. That's not what we do. That's not what we say. That's not what Jack Smith says. What he says here is the same thing that every prosecutor has to say before they charge any case, which is the evidence is sufficient enough that a jury could convict. You have to make that finding as a prosecutor before you charge a first-year drug case or before you charge the former president with a vast conspiracy. So it's a really important nuance, but it matters. He's not making some bold prediction here. Oh, if we went to trial, we would have won for sure. What he's saying is the evidence was enough that we could have gone to a trial and a jury could have convicted. That's different than saying a jury would have convicted.
Fair enough. I do want to ask you about the other special counsel report, that classified documents case. Why haven't we seen that released, or will we ever?
I'm starting to doubt that. I mean, the Justice Department's position right now is that the public should not see the other report, the classified documents report. The Justice Department's position is because there are still two active defendants here, the non-Trump defendants, Nauta and De Oliveira, all we want to do is provide this behind closed doors to certain leaders of Congress. So even DOJ is not saying we want to put it out there publicly. Now, Trump's team is still not satisfied with that. There's going to be an argument on Friday where Trump's team is going to argue DOJ cannot even send this over to Congress because I guess it might leak from there. Now, I think DOJ clearly has the right to do that. I think DOJ should prevail there. But as it currently stands, even DOJ has no intention to make that other report public.
Elie Honig, thank you so much for walking us through all those details. Appreciate it.